All right, that is the Prime Minister, and the big headline coming in there is the announcement of that economic package. Of course, details are awaited, but the Prime Minister is saying that including the decisions that were announced by the RBI previously, this economic package, the Atmanirbhar economic package, amounts to about 10% of GDP. Remember, that is what the hope and the expectation was. So far, what was announced by the government is as part of the first phase of relief measures amounted to under 1% of GDP. Now, how this is going to work, what will be the phasing of this relief package? It addresses labour, land, liquidity in the Prime Minister's own words. He says that the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman over the next few days will give us more clarity and more colour on the details. It will address the most vulnerable, the daily wage earners. It will address the MSME sector as well. And of course, the overarching theme there seems to be to go local. That was the message from the Prime Minister. We need to go local and we need to be vocal about going local. Now, this has been an idea. I don't know whether this means import substitution, because that has been something that critics have argued against, saying that we don't want to go back. So the question now is, what will self-reliant mean in the context of India also wanting to become part of the global supply chain, draw in foreign direct investment? How should one read this approach to going local? Well, let's get in reactions now. We've got a whole bunch of people here with us. Anil Bhardwaj, the Secretary General at the Federation of Indian Micro and Small Medium Enterprises, with us. Also joining us to take this discussion forward, Sangeeta Reddy, President of FICCI, the Joint Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals, Vikram Kirloskar, President of CII, Sharad Kumar Saraf, the President of FIO, all of them with us. Mr. Bhardwaj, let me get a first comment in from you. We don't have the details. The Prime Minister saying that this package will include a package for the MSME sector as well. On balance, what do you make of it?
Very, very encouraging words, Shireen. 20 lakh crore, and specifically mentioning MSMEs and also highlighting the contours also broadly, especially the liquidity that would be addressed, the land-related issue, that means farmers-related issues, and issues of labor, and these are the issues that we have been raising. So in the next few days, we very eagerly look forward to getting these problems addressed that are related to banks, salaries, and markets also.
Yes, we are waiting to hear on the details, but of course MSMEs have been making a long list of demands. Sangeeta Reddy also with us. Sangeeta Reddy, we still don't have clarity on the details, but it's a 20 lakh crore rupee package that the Prime Minister has unveiled as part of the Atmanirbhar or Self-Reliant India economic package. The Finance Minister is expected to give us more details over the next few days, much more than what industry was expecting. Sangeeta, can you hear me?
Yes, Shireen, I can.
Well, we'll wait.
Feeble, but I can.
Yeah, I was asking. Yeah, go ahead. I said that this is much more than what industry was expecting. We don't have details yet, but just the quantum of the package seems to be more than what industry was expecting.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you, Shireen.
Yes, Sangeeta, I said that the details of the package are awaited, but on balance, 10% of GDP is what the Prime Minister said. It's more than what the industry was expecting.
So I think, like you rightly said, details are awaited, but I think the vision that he showed for the whole country with a large-scale economic package, and I think business in India will be encouraged by this, but his focus on economy, infrastructure, technology, demographic, demand generation, a self-reliant India, it is an exciting vision. Now we look forward to details and we look forward to powerful execution, but I'm sure that the industry and individuals will all be enthused by this.
Yes, I would imagine that everyone will be enthused. I expect this to be staggered out, because that's the suggestion that the Prime Minister gave, that the Finance Minister will, over the next few days, give us more details on how this is actually going to work. Where is this going to be funded from? All of those questions, I would imagine, will be addressed. But Vikram Kirloskar, President of CII, also with us. Vikram, Atmanirbhar Bharat economic package, 10% of GDP, 20 lakh crore stimulus package from the Prime Minister?
The first time I'm smiling in a long time and really feeling relieved. Today's speech was completely unexpected for me. And I said, we are going back to lockdown number 4 and what we have to do. 20 lakh crore is amazing. We, from CII, in the first 3 weeks, we asked for a package which was roughly, I think, 7.5 or 8 lakh crores. And then we said, no, this is not enough as the lockdown went up, and we upped it to 15 lakh crores. And what the Prime Minister is talking about is 20 lakh crores. I'm sure they have looked at all our requests from other associations. This is going to be a game changer. Now, it's very important, along with this game changer, that individuals, people, you and me and all the public, be responsible, sensible, responsible, respecting people. It's the issue of masks, hygiene, and social distancing. These 3 items and a 20 lakh package will be, we'll be sailing, we'll be soaring. I'm really thrilled. I'm really
yes. Yeah, I can see the smile on your face, Vikram Kirloskar. That's very, very evident. There's smiles on Sangeeta's, broad smile on Sangeeta's face as well. Mr. Saraf, let me come to you also, sir. And, we're still waiting for clarity on the breakup, etc. But on balance, the emphasis was very clearly on self-reliance, on local market, on local demand. Where does that leave exporters?
Well, I think, missed out on one issue. He also mentioned that in Indian culture, when we say local and self-reliant, it includes Vasudev Kutumbakam. It includes good and benefit for all, and that, I believe, includes exports. The speech of the Prime Minister was not only satisfying, but was also highly inspiring. I felt very much inspired by his call for self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think this was long overdue, and it is also very timely. And he has mentioned convert adversity into opportunity. He has given several very good examples of we rising to the demands of the times, and the 5 pillars that he mentioned about on the self-reliant India of economy, infrastructure, system improvement, technology-based system improvement, demography, and demand. I think in the demand, he has included both demand and supply. I think he has covered it all. The quantum of package, 20 lakh rupees package, is indeed path-breaking. It is one of the highest given by any country in the world, except probably Japan. It is more than what any European country has given. And I think he has shown great vision in his speech. I feel, just give me 1 minute to add this, that this package will truly make India self-reliant, provided we carry out the reforms that the Prime Minister has also mentioned. The grassroots level reforms for starting an industry, attracting investment in every single district of the country is very important. And I hope it will come through.
Yes. Sangeeta and Mr. Kirloskar, I want to get your thoughts on what the Prime Minister said. He said that this package includes land, labour and liquidity. Now, how much of it is captured by way of liquidity, we don't know. Now, as far as labour is concerned, we've already seen moves by UP and Madhya Pradesh where there is a suspension of all labour legislation barring 3 or 4. And that, even the Chief Economic Advisor in his conversation with me seems to suggest is the way forward. The Prime Minister very specifically brought in land and labour as part of this economic package. My question to you, Vikram Kirloskar, is do you believe that the land ordinance that was scrapped is likely to be brought back?
Well, the Karnataka government has done something very special, a couple of days ago, where you can buy farmland for industry, maximum 30 days. I think the states, because this is all, some of these are state subjects, labor is also partly a state subject. I think the states are going to align with the Prime Minister. They will bring in the necessary reforms, making it easy to buy land for industry. On labor reform, my point is, yes, we need a lot of flexibility in labor. We also need to safeguard labor. We need to do a balance of that, so we take care of labor as well as get labor more productive, get our assets more productive. I have a sort of a feel there's going to be a huge makeover in the way India works. I think that is what the Prime Minister is trying to say. We need to change our way of thinking. We've got this whole, we're going through this crisis of coronavirus. We're willing to spend 20 lakh crores. Let's do a complete changeover in our way of thinking. I am sure people are getting, they took a lot of data from us in the last 25, 30 days. We were giving so much information, so many papers. I'm sure, now I feel confident that they were read. And I think a lot of what CII and other associations have given, other experts have given, I think people will listen, the government will listen to them and come up with packages based on that. I'm feeling very confident of that now.
Yes,
I think
let me bring...
wait a few days, we'll start
You're feeling confident?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need to wait a few days. I think it will start from tomorrow. The finance minister is expected to perhaps present the first installment of what we should expect tomorrow. That's the indication. But let me bring in Kaushik Das, the chief economist, India at Deutsche Bank. Kaushik, many thanks for joining us. Now, 10% of GDP, 20 lakh crore rupees. This also includes previous measures that were announced by the Reserve Bank of India, the LTRO, the TLTRO, and of course the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana that was announced by the government earlier. Now, this is far higher than what was expected. We don't know how this is being funded, and we don't know how much of what the Prime Minister has announced will be apportioned by way of liquidity, because he spoke of land, labour and liquidity as part of this economic package. What do you make of it, Kaushik?
Hi, Shirin. I think this is a very bold move. In fact, financial market participants were waiting for this kind of a package for a long time, and people were getting a little restless that why the package is not coming. And when it came, it's quite a big package, and it's almost similar to what the advanced countries have given to fight coronavirus. So to that extent, it's very positive. Now, what we need to see, what is the breakup of new incremental, support that is being given to the economy, because this also contains support from RBI and other things that have been done. But I think given the situation that we have in the real economy, today we had IIP growth for March falling 16.7% with just a 7-day lockdown in March. So you can imagine what will happen in April and May when the data come out. So this kind of support is required. And I think this will help India not just, kind of come back to some kind of positive growth in FY22, which we are projecting to be at 6% odd number. But I think the overall medium-term trajectory will look much better if you're going ahead with reforms in the, labor sector and, other factors of production. So the package, in my view, would be both short-term oriented as well as long-term oriented to change India in a quantum leap, just like Prime Minister mentioned. But we have to look at the numbers to figure out how much increase in fiscal deficit and how much additional support that may be required from RBI in this package.
Yeah, but Kaushik, the question is that so far the commentary coming in from North Bloc on record was that, look, we shouldn't compare ourselves with US-style stimulus packages. We have to cut our coat to suit the cloth that we have, and so on and so forth. Now, we still have to wait to see what is announced by the government by way of what is actual liquidity measures and how much of this is taken up by some of the other things. But on balance, given the borrowing program that was announced by the government and then this 20 lakh crore rupees stimulus package, how do you read the two?
Yeah,
because then the borrowing program seems to be fairly inadequate.
Yeah, so Shirin, we have to see the breakdown, and also remember there could be a lot of announcement which could be in the form of credit guarantee for medium and small scale industries and other sectors, which need not go into fiscal deficit calculation immediately, because what happens is that seen as a contingent liability, and that adds to the debt obligation. So what happens is your debt GDP goes up because that becomes the government's obligation in case there is a credit accident and government has to fiscalize that cost. But it need not go directly into the fiscal deficit calculation if the credit guarantees are seen more like, off balance sheet. So we have to see what is the component of contingent liability that are being announced, which is in the form of credit guarantees, and what is the actual expenditure that the government is going to take on the budget, and that will inform the fiscal deficit calculation and market borrowing.
Yes, you're right. Now, this brings us to the question of where this actually leaves Budget 2020. And let me bring Dinesh Kanabar into the conversation as well. Mr. Kanabar, for all practical purposes, Budget 2020 has been rendered irrelevant, but not just because of the estimates on both the expenditure and the revenue side, going awry, but now also in light of what has been announced by the Prime Minister with this stimulus package. So how are you reading this, and where is it that you believe you would now require more color, more clarity?
So when you look at an economic package of 20 lakh crores of rupees, which is 10% of the GDP, by definition, that is going to mean a substantial fiscal deficit. And that's what the industry has been asking for. I think everybody who's on your panel at this point of time has been making that representation to say that given the fact that there is no inflation at this point of time, it is necessary to provide a stimulus. I think the key issue is, are we building a base where the manufacturing sector in India becomes so robust and so large that it starts contributing, whether it is in terms of creation of employment, whether it is in terms of technology moving, whether it is in terms of some of those people who want to shift manufacturing from China to India. All of that coming together is what's going to create that stimulus. We saw, for example, that when we're looking at pharmaceuticals, a substantial portion of the APIs were being imported. That was not a situation many years back. So there's a room in several sectors where India can become self-reliant. If the investments go there with the right tax breaks and everything else, that's what's going to make the country reliant, and then the growth coming on from there.
Yes, you're right about that. Let me bring Sangeeta Reddy back into the conversation. Sangeeta, given where we find ourselves today, as far as the economy is concerned, and the Prime Minister, also mentioning about lockdown 4.0, which will start from the 17th of May. Of course, the details are still awaited. He said that the government will notify further relaxations, etc. Now, again, it will depend on how this package is executed, how much of this is front-loaded, and what the timelines will be. What would the expectation be now of industry, since it's also been waiting for a long time for these measures to be announced?
So, Shireen, I think what this package does is it enables the imagination to think of a stronger India. It gives us a framework in that everything that we had asked for can be implemented or executed. And if you remember, we had asked for money in the hands of the vulnerable, a mechanism of liquidity and sovereign guarantee to ensure that business continuity. And then there was an element in the FICCI proposal of rebuilding India. And that, I think, is where a bulk of this is going to go. Because the aspect of saying self-reliance, yet take advantage of the disruption in the global supply chain. And I also see a deeper meaning in the focus on labor as well as on land. That means it's readying ourselves. And I don't think it should be referred to as labor. It's actually an employment generation strategy, which is perfect for the demographic of India, which was also mentioned. So, I was reading today that somebody said when the winds of change are blowing, some people build walls and some people build windmills to take advantage of this. I think that's what India is doing now, whether it's a digital windmill or an infrastructure windmill. Of course, details have to be looked at. Of course, we have to worry about what's going to happen to the inflation. And the last thing is, I think it's very important that this plan of expenditure comes with a medium-term fiscal consolidation so that India ratings are not affected as well. And I'm sure we'll see that too. But for now, I think it's a thank you for listening to all of us. We've done a lot of, insight, a lot of introspection, and this is a time to really dream big for India. Let's say thank you to Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and everybody who worked on this. And just one last, I remember one comment where I said every international economist is saying this is not the time to worry about fiscal deficit. And somebody very senior said, yes, of course, we understand that. Today is proof that they're not just understood, but they're implementing that. So it's a good step towards a great India.
All right, so a big thank you coming in there from industry. We've also got Soumya Kanti Ghosh, the Chief Economist at SBI, with us. Soumya, many thanks for joining us. 20 lakh crore rupees stimulus that's been announced by the Prime Minister. It is a big reset. I don't think anyone on the street was anticipating a number this large, especially given the commentary that had come in from North Block over the last several weeks in terms of tempering down expectations. But Soumya, and I'm just putting together some of the breakup. The LTRO was 1 lakh, TLTRO 1 lakh, TLTRO NBFC 50,000, the CRR cut amounting to 1.37 lakh crores, the SLF mutual fund package 50,000 crore and about 2 lakh crores. That was what the finance minister had announced earlier. Ballpark numbers. So about 6.5 lakh crore rupees was already announced between the government and the RBI within this overarching 20 lakh crore package. How are you reading this, Soumya? What's your sense on where this leaves us?
No, I think this is a very welcome announcement, and basically at 10% of GDP, I think this was the amount, I think, which a lot of people was not even expecting, because this 20 lakh crores is a big amount.
Yeah.
But we also need to look into the composition of this financing. As you rightly said, it also includes the RBI, as it was mentioned in the speech. So if you include the RBI and others, so we need to understand how this is distributed in terms of land, in terms of labor, in terms of the guarantee for the MSME sector. So that actually will give a comprehensive picture of how this package has been structured. But I think it's a very positive development, because right now we need a push in terms of the growth numbers to pick up, given the fact that we are already in lockdown for the last 2 months.
Yes, and lockdown 4 is here. I remember that as far as one of the proposals put forward by the Niti Aayog was concerned, one scenario that they had sort of factored in, depending on the duration of the lockdown, was a package to the tune of 10% of GDP. So that was a proposal that the Niti Aayog had put forward to the government, and this was, of course, under consideration, and it looks like that is the route that the government has chosen to take. Vikram Kirloskar, back to you now. And my same question to you in terms. We've lost that line with Vikram, but Soumya, do you believe that this is going to be staggered? Because that seems to have been the indication that came in.
No, I think, Sirin, it will be staggered, because all countries are following a staggered approach. If you look at the experience of all other countries, on average, around 4 packages have been announced by most countries. So this will be a staggered one, and this will also be in fiscal and monetary policy coordination. I think the monetary policy is also due in the month of June. Hopefully, there will be some more policies from the central bank. But given the fact that pandemic comes back in waves, because of the fact that it's the nature of any pandemic disaster. So I think the government possibly has taken that factor into consideration, because even if the lockdown, given the fact that a lockdown is now a very costly proposition, so even if the lockdown 4 happens with some restrictions, I think that factor possibly has been taken into consideration, given the fact that we may be possibly in for a long winter.
Yes, it looks like the government has realized that perhaps the restrictions, the constraints that we are operating within will continue, and that was the message from the Prime Minister as well, that we will have to deal with the virus. We're going to have to learn to cope with the virus, and we cannot allow it to constrain us beyond a point. Vikram Kirloskar, what is this now going to mean as far as industry is concerned, and how will industry read the message from the Prime Minister on self-reliance, on Atmanirbharta, on local brands, buy local, go vocal, about buying local? What is the big takeaway for industry?
Well, I think this package is going to mean a huge amount of responsibility. Let's understand, when you do 20 lakh crore kind of spending, it means there's a lot of borrowing somewhere. The country is going to be indebted. for some time. There's going to be, credit rating issues. There are going to be many other issues. So it's very important that this 20 lakh crores, as it gets spent, as we build industry, as we build assets, as we build infrastructure, there's a good return on all of it. Unless we make those highly productive and make them profitable, they will not. We will not be able to repay the debts over a longer period of time. And that, I think that's very, very important. So when we start using this money, we have to, it's not only the government which is resetting itself, it's not only the country that's resetting the norms of doing business, the reforms, etc. We as business people have to make sure our new business model after this works in such a way that the country can repay back this 20 lakh crores. I think that's our responsibility, and we'll have to take that very seriously and make sure we do our planning in that manner.
Yes, we will have to make sure that that debt to GDP is not going to be a cause for concern. This is also going to be something that rating agencies, etc., will go over very carefully. And the concern that government officials did raise when we spoke with them was about the outstanding ECBs for corporate India in excess of about 220 billion. So I think those were some of the concerns that were raised. But Mr. Saraf and Mr. Agarwal, let me come to the two of you. And Mr. Agarwal, let me ask you, as far as the specific demands of the MSME sector, credit guarantee is a must. Credit line is the other demand that the MSME sector has made. We don't know how much of this 20 lakh crore rupee package will be for MSMEs. What's your hope? Mr. Agarwal, can you hear me? Mr. Agarwal? No, I don't think he can hear us. Let me... Mr. Bhardwaj, my apologies. Mr. Bhardwaj, my question to you on what is the expectation of how much will come to the MSMEs from this?
Well, it's difficult to speculate at this moment, but credit guarantee, as you rightly said, has been one of the most important demands because banks are not in a position to lend because of obvious reasons. The circumstances are also not right, and you have to create a mechanism, market-based mechanism, so that the loans extended to MSMEs during this period, short-term, long-term, could be backed by credit guarantee. So I think this is a very good move, and I think it is going to, if I could speculate, I think a lakh crore worth of amount would be required to create a fairly big amount of credit guarantee that would justify the kind of lending we require. But Shireen, one of the most important things that I read in this announcement is the highlighting of self-sufficiency and self-reliance and self-dependency. And that perhaps gives us an idea that there is going to be pump priming of economy also, and enhancement of public procurement where we have direct interest, because 25% of union government's purchases are earmarked for the MSMEs. So certainly we look forward to that to happen also. And one more comment I would like to make on the initial part that you made, that are we also going to be a little protectionist, so to say, in order to create the self-sufficiency, at the same time inviting global value chains to India? I think this is a fine balance that would be required. But I think this is the way forward. The secular way of opening up is, I think, is a bygone era. And I think as we move forward, these are the two simultaneous which have to take up somewhere, and we protect certain type of industries for the domestic manufacture.
That's right. In fact, breaking on our screens, very important news. Jubilant Life Sciences has signed a deal with Gilead for the production of remdesivir. Remember, remdesivir is currently being used in the US to deal with COVID-19. So Jubilant Life Sciences has now inked the rights to sell remdesivir with Gilead in 127 countries. Let me also welcome to the program Ajay Singh, the Chairman and Managing Director of SpiceJet. All of industry at this point in time beaming, big smiles on everybody's faces. Mr. Singh, we're still awaiting details and clarity on how much of this is actually going to mean additional liquidity. What does land and labor, how does that get factored into this economic package? But on balance, a big reset.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think what Mr. Modi is trying to do is to convert this adversity into an opportunity. And I think he's shown that he's really looking at that very seriously. I think very exciting that they should be spending 10% of the GDP, something that the economy desperately required. For sure, this will give a huge stimulus, no matter where this is spent. And of course, we still need to see the fine print, but no matter where this money is spent, this is going to give a huge stimulus to the economy. But what was even more interesting from my perspective was the kind of structural reform that he was talking about. And he was speaking about resetting this whole economy, about reform on land, labor, and laws. If we can simplify our systems and our processes, look afresh at the way we do business, at the way we even create titles for our land, at the way we do disservice today to our labor class by putting all sorts of stringent rules and regulations around the mobility of labor. I think if we can use this adversity to get rid of all these problems that we've been stuck with for so many years, it would be an adversity which we will probably at some point of time, no matter how painful it is today, remember for the reform that it brought in.
Yes, and we will have to wait to see what the Prime Minister meant by land, because remember, on labour, as I pointed out, you've seen two state governments. You've seen UP and Madhya Pradesh move in with ordinances, Gujarat also proposing to do the same. He brought in land specifically. Now, remember, in the first term of the government, they had brought in an ordinance to deal with the land legislation. It was then scrapped. There was a U-turn that was done. Is the government now looking at bringing back that legislation? Mr. Singh, is that your interpretation?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think, what an adversity of this sort provides to you is an opportunity to do things which you otherwise in normal circumstances just could not have done because of all the politics and the pressure around it. And at this point of time, there is a unique opportunity for India to try and get some of these companies that are looking to get out of China, get them, roll out the red carpet for them, and make sure they come into India. And one of the critical elements of that, of course, is the land reform. There has to be a way in which land can be traded, mortgaged, and so on, and for people to have clear title to it.
Let me bring in Mr. Jayant Sinha, the former Minister of State for Finance, in on the conversation. Mr. Sinha, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. And I understand that a lot of work has gone into putting this package together, and perhaps that's why it's taken as long as it has for this to be unveiled. Now, we're still awaiting details on how this is going to happen, what will be the actual liquidity or stimulus part of this package. If you can help us understand how this is going to work, in what fashion will this be staggered? Give us some color on what we should expect.
Good evening, Shireen, and very happy to be with you and all your guests on this very historic night when the Honorable Prime Minister has announced a package that goes well beyond what other countries have done. And I'll point you to three very important aspects of this. First, you'll find that most other countries reacted very quickly. Their packages were reactive. They covered some issues. They didn't cover all the issues. The Honorable Prime Minister has done this in a proactive way. And as he's laid out, we are going to be covering all the issues addressing all vulnerable sections of society. So that's a very important point. It's a very proactive, very visionary package that will now be rolled out. The second important point to recognize here is that the India that we want to build is an India that is going to be resilient, self-reliant, and of course the word the Honorable Prime Minister used was Atmanirbharta. Now this is a very forward-looking concept. It's a concept based on competitiveness. It's a concept based on embracing the world as it is right now, and for India to demonstrate real global leadership on the issues that matter for the world right now. So it's a very forward-looking, very confident, very assertive view on where India needs to go. And that's a second very important point that we need to take into account. And then the third aspect of this, which I want to highlight, is the reforms that are going to now be undertaken as part of this. As we all know, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And the Honorable Prime Minister said that, जब उन्होंने कहा कि आपदा को अवसर बनाना है, We have to take crisis and we have to make it into an opportunity so that we can build a resilient India, the India of our dreams, and demonstrate to the world that we can provide the global leadership that India increasingly is starting to expect from India under the inspirational leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister. So as you can see, it really was something well worth waiting for, and I think it's really going to set a roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years for India.
Okay, sir, if I could just ask you to elaborate on the reform part of the package that you spoke of, and the Prime Minister spoke specifically of land and labour. Now, are we given to understand that the centre will move along with what we've seen other states do, UP and MP specifically, moving the labour ordinances, suspending all labour legislation, barring 3 or 4 for a period of 3 years? And on land specifically, are we given to understand that a land ordinance is also back on the table?
The details will be forthcoming, Shireen. So we just have to wait for the announcements, just like we waited for this announcement, and it was well worth the wait, as I said. So let's wait for the individual announcements. I will make the point, of course, that labor is a concurrent subject, and so everything that's passed at the state level has to also be passed at the center. But what I think we have seen on the land and on the labor side is that there is a race to the top. Our states are competing, they're coming up with innovative legislation, they are being very business friendly, and this experimentation, this innovation that we are seeing at the state level is an excellent development, and I think that will continue. But really what we want to continue to do is to enable our states, working with the center, to be able to go out and compete for investment and bring the world's best companies and grow our companies to be the world's best companies.
So, you spoke about bringing in the best companies from the world to India and drawing in foreign direct investment. The Prime Minister spoke several times about supply chain, but a large part of his speech towards the end was focused on the local market, also supporting local brands, supporting local produce, and being vocal about local. So how will that be read by foreign investors who are looking to make investments into India?
No, I think they're two sides of the same coin, Shireen. Even the best global companies are attracted to India because we are such a large local market as well, right? And so we've always said to the global multinationals that India is more than just a market. India is a production platform as well. The innovation that you have to do for the Indian market, the kinds of products that you design for the Indian market will also enable you to export from India around the world. So global and local today are, as I said, two sides of the same coin now. And similarly for our local companies, and we have some of them on your show right now, we have very, very competitive, excellent local companies that can go out and compete and beat the world's best. So global and local go hand in hand. They're two sides of the same coin. But for a resilient India, an India that can compete and win against the world's best, we need global players in India and we need local players to become global players. But it's a global vision, it's a global outlook, and it's a global orientation that we have.
Mr. Sinha, I want to, of course, we are still waiting for clarity on the numbers, but I just want to understand how you read this 10% of GDP. It was not what anybody was expecting. Industry had also spoken about, a package of 5 to 6 lakh crore rupees, and this is 20 lakh crores. Of course, it takes into account the measures announced previously by the RBI, etc. Now, what the commentary from North Block so far was that, look, there isn't enough fiscal room, we are dealing with fiscal constraints, and we need to be mindful of those fiscal constraints. So in the context of the commentary so far and what was announced today, how do we reconcile the two and what it actually means then in terms of financing this, additional borrowing, and the fiscal deficit itself?
Those are all very important considerations, and they have duly been incorporated in the policy measures and ideas that you will now to see unfold. But you have to recognize that it's not so much the quantity as much it is the quality of the expenditure that matters. And part of the work that's gone into putting this reform package together is to ensure that the composition of this expenditure is world-class. The Honorable Prime Minister spoke, for instance, about infrastructure. He spoke about supply chains. So what we need to do is to ensure that the spending that we do, the money that we put to work, is money that is genuinely building a resilient, competitive India that will take us forward and enable us to compete. So the composition of the expenditure, so that we don't, waste money. And sadly, I will say that in 2008 and 9, which was, of course, a chapter of India's economic history that we've studied very carefully, there was, in fact, a great deal of expenditure as well. Fiscal deficit went up from 2.5% to 6% and 6.5%. But unfortunately, that expenditure resulted in high inflation. It resulted in the rupee crashing, and it didn't enable India to become any more competitive. In fact, we had a big NPA problem that emanated from that, one could almost call it reckless spending. So the composition of the expenditure, the quality of the reform proposals, the initiatives that we are going to undertake, these are the ones that are being worked on and will be announced.
Okay, let me get in a quick word in from Ajay Singh before I let him go. Mr. Singh, lockdown 4 is here. We are still waiting to hear from the government on what the further relaxations will be. The assumption is that at least 20% of domestic air travel will be allowed to restart. I know that there's been a draft SOP that's been released by the government today for stakeholder consultation. What's your best case, sir, on when you will start to see flights taking off?
We are ready, Shireen, and we are just awaiting word from the government. We think that the government has come up with an eminently sensible SOP, which really takes into account the fact that aviation actually is probably the safest form of public transport available to us at this time. And we are very happy to start right away. There are certain things that the government has asked for, which might take a few days for all the airlines and the airports to put together. But certainly, if the government asks us to start up next week, we are ready. And of course, aviation is incredibly important. As we all know, it's an integral part of our economy. I think the Prime Minister has been speaking about local and self-reliance. I think an important element of that is going to be local travel. For people to go for vacation within our own country and explore our own country, as opposed to all this international these vacations that we take. So I think incredible opportunity for our sector. Just the fact that so much money will be spent in the economy means that some of it is certainly going towards reform in our sector. And I completely agree with my friend Jayant that it's going to be extremely important that the money is actually spent towards reform of our economy.
Yeah. Yes, the quality of expenditure, as Mr. Sinha pointed out, will be very important. Mr. Singh, many thanks for joining us. Let me also bring in the former Finance Secretary, Subhash Chandra Garg, into the conversation. Mr. Garg, many thanks for joining us. This is a big reset. This makes Budget 2020 totally irrelevant, doesn't it, Mr. Garg? What do you make of the big announcement that's come in from the Prime Minister and what it will mean for the economy?
Shireen, the package which I heard today, I think there are three main components to it. One, of course, is we don't know the exact dimensions of that, but a fiscal package, which will be the government additional expenditure. The second component, to my mind, would be a large credit package, which will come, part of that has already come from the Reserve Bank and all. And third would be the reform package. I think these are the three main components. Fiscal, I think we'll wait, but earlier the government said they are cutting down the expenditure. It seems now that the government would reverse the course. The fact that additional 4 lakh crores of borrowings were also announced also indicate that something close to 5 to 6 lakh crore of the 20 lakh crore package might come from this fiscal side. The bulk will be from the credit side. About 5 lakh crore of package has already come from the Reserve Bank in the form of the CLTROs, cash reserve ratio cut and all. Maybe there would be another 7 to 10 lakh crores kind of credit package, maybe backed by the government guarantee to some extent, which we've been hearing for the MSMEs and others. but we'll have to wait for the exact announcement of that. Reform package, to my mind, is the most important. This is the opportunity, and if I read this, the whole notion or the idea of making India self-reliant, if it is interpreted to make India a very competitive, a globally competitive economy, and then being self-reliant, I think we would be doing the right thing. There is a big agenda across the entire sectors of production, product market and all. On land alone, there is a massive reform agenda which is required. Leasing has to be freed. The purchases of the land has to be made much more open, clearer. The compensation which has to be paid is totally out of market. So there are a lot of things. On agriculture markets, there is no need for the market piece to continue. These kind of compulsion for bringing the agriculture produce to mandis, those need to go. So there is enormous amount of agenda on power and other kind of elements which go into making Indian economy competitive.
Since you talked about power, Mr. Garg, I just wanted to get I just wanted to get a quick word in from you, because there was also the Power Ministry was working on a 1 lakh crore rupee package as part of these relief measures. Do you believe that that is also likely to be part of this 20 lakh crore rupee relief package?
The power sector has to have some package. But depending upon whether it's a package to pay for the unpaid bills, which is not a reform in my judgment, or the power sector package is used to do the reforms, to take out the industry into the private hands, to make sure that the power to industry is reasonably priced. So if those kind of reforms are bundled along with a package for the power sector, I think that would work to make it competitive. Otherwise, it will be unproductive expenditure.
Okay, just hold on, sir. Mr. Sinha, I know you have to go, sir. Let me get a quick last word in from you. I think what the explanation given by Mr. Garg, I think comprehensively put it that we have to look at this in three buckets: fiscal, the credit guarantees, as well as the reform side of the package. And on the reform side of the package, I think there has been a very clear indication that factor market reforms is what the government intends to move ahead with. So a quick final comment from you on what we should now expect over the next few days as the finance minister starts to put this relief package into execution.
I think, as I said, what we should be looking forward to is a very bold set of reforms. Because, as I said right at the outset, this is not a reactive package that has been put together very quickly, as you saw from some of the other countries. This is a very proactive, future-looking package that has been put together to position India so that this becomes, the 21st century becomes India's century.
The 21st century becomes India's century. Mr. Sinha, appreciate you joining us. Thanks very much for your time. Nilesh Shah also with us. Nilesh, thanks very much for standing by. The SGX Nifty, I think the last time I had a look at it, it was up by more than 4%. Markets clearly excited with the announcement, the much-awaited announcement that's come in. What will you seek clarity on as we move into trading hours tomorrow?
Obviously, Shirin, devil is in the details. So one will be, as Mr. Jayant Sinha mentioned, what is the quality of spending? Second will be, what will be the contours of financing? Between the quality of spending and contours of financing, market will try to evaluate the stimulus.
Yes. What is your best estimate at this point in time, Nilesh, given what we've already seen being announced by the government in terms of the borrowing calendar? We're also given to understand that there has been a fair amount of work that's happened on expenditure compression. But what would your best guess be, given what has been announced today on the fiscal side?
So, Shireen, if I look at it from an external point of view, we have about $60 billion trade deficit with China. Now, if we can replace made in China goods with made in India goods, $20-30 billion could be easily shaved off from there. We import about $21 billion of coal, despite having third largest reserve of coal in the world. If we can ramp up production at Coal India, then to that extent, our import bill of coal can come down. We also import about $30-35 billion of gold, which is a dead asset for us because we are the largest owner of gold. If we can monetize existing gold and shave that $30-35 billion out, that's collectively almost $100 billion saving. On top of it, electronic imports were running at a fast pace. At one point of time, they were threatening to exceed oil imports. Unfortunately, with some active steps taken by the government, the electronic imports have actually started declining. If we can increase that pace with the supply chain disruption coming out of China, then between coal, gold, China deficit, and electronic imports, we could have substantial savings.
Yes, it will mean substantial savings. Navneet Munot also with us from SBI Mutual Fund. Navneet, many thanks for joining us. The expectation is that perhaps tomorrow's installment will involve the MSME sector. Now, broadly, what we've been hearing in the past is that the 40,000 crore rupee corpus, which will mean lending of up to 3 lakh crore rupees with at least a 20% government guarantee on loans, that is likely to be the contours. And of course, this is unofficial at this point in time. But Navneet, not just MSMEs, but on balance, this big announcement that's come in, rather unexpected announcement that's come in from the Prime Minister, and what it means for the markets.
No, absolutely. I think it's time where we can think about restarting India, reimagining India, rebooting India. When he talks about liquidity, I would read it like broader financial sector reforms. You rightly mentioned land and labor, meaning factor market reforms. I would add power to that. And when he talks about law, the fourth aspect, I take it as administrative, judicial, regulatory reforms. And when he talks about innovation, digitalization, social infrastructure, demographics, all of this you put together, I mean, this is indeed a big Y2K movement for India in some of the industries. And I'm sure, I mean, it can turn out to be like one of those great twist with destiny movement. And I'll just add half a minute, Shireen, that over the last 2 months, I mean, we have all been working on survival, and now we are talking about the revival also. And in that survival, we have built a huge social capital in a 1.35 billion people. And I'm sure that will go a long way as we reimagine our economic journey also.
You're very right, Navneet, that, at this point in time, the conversation was really on support and relief. And what seems to be the government's announcement today is stimulus. And again, I go back to the point that it was very clear from the commentary that was coming in from North Bloc, from Niti Aayog, that, look, our stimulus measures have to be different from stimulus measures that have been taken up by other countries. It has to be calibrated. It has to be, phased. So it seems like perhaps the decision taken at the highest levels of government perhaps decided to bite the bullet as of now. But Navneet, what is this now going to mean as far as the markets are concerned?
No, of course, markets will take it very positively over the last few days. This is a moment everybody has been expecting. And as you rightly mentioned earlier, I think a combination of demographics, demand, and I would add democracy and the digital opportunity that India is throwing. I mean, talking about the one deal that we have heard about, a Silicon Valley company investing into a large tech platform. I think after hearing this speech, and if it is followed by right measures from tomorrow, I can imagine lots of those kind of deals where the world would be looking towards India to look for those investment opportunities.
Yes, certainly will be looking to India for those.
The world is flush with so much of liquidity. I mean, that window may not be there for long because every country needs that capital. But I think the kind of opportunity we offer, I think if we grab this opportunity, it could be our moment in history.
Yes, it certainly could be if, as you point out, we grab that opportunity. Gentlemen, we've also got, two very stock-specific news items, developments coming in. One, of course, is Jubilant Life Sciences and inking that deal with Gilead to produce remdesivir. So that's a big announcement that's coming. And the other one is Vedanta looking at delisting. I know you don't talk stock-specific, but just to get your take on both these big developments that have been overshadowed by the big announcement that's coming from the Prime Minister, Nilesh.
Undoubtedly, clearly, all those stock-specific things are nothing when we compare to the broad stimulus package announced.
Yes.
And unfortunately, neither me nor Navneet can speak with stock-specific things.
I know. No, I understand that completely, but these are big developments that we're speaking of. So how would you call, what would be the way that you define this big reset, Nilesh, game changer? How would you like to describe the announcement that's come in today?
So, Sirin, if we know, in 1980, India and China were of similar size. In 40 years, they have left us behind by 4 times. They became manufacturer to the world. They were open to foreign direct investments, and we were left behind. We did a wonderful work on the IT industry side, technology side. Now, probably it is time to repeat the same on the manufacturing side. And I just want to share one data. Samsung came to India long before it went to Vietnam. It makes in India and sells in India. And it's one of the largest consumer durable company. It's about $10 to $12 billion turnover. They make in Vietnam and sell all over the world. The turnover in Vietnam is $62 billion, 6 times more than India, in an economy which is 1/10 the size of India. They contribute 28% of GDP to Vietnam. Vietnam is a miracle economy because they could get company like Samsung and make them flourish. We have to get companies out of China. We have great image right now.
Yeah.
China gave virus to the world. We are giving medicine. Encash that goodwill. Let companies come to India. Help them flourish like Vietnam has flourished, Samsung, and see the growth opportunity.
Yes, Nilesh, thanks very much. Navneet, a quick last comment from you. How would you describe what's been announced today?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, if you look at the history of the world, great countries need 3 things. Number 1, a strong rule of law, transparency, great institutions, property rights. I think he talked about it. Number 2 is innovation and education. He talked about it. And number 3 is strong social security, where we have already been working over the last few years. And I think he reiterated it. I think over the next couple of months, this is our opportunity. This is our movement. The world is looking forward to a country of 1.3 billion people. I think that the largest supplier of labor force to the world for next several decades, the biggest demand, the biggest supplier of the new middle class, I think, which can come from India. And I think definitely it could be our movement. I hope that all of us rise to occasion. He has injected a lot of confidence. He's talked about injecting a lot of capital with the multiplier effect. I think if all of us rise to the occasion, it could be our movement.
Yes, it certainly could be. Mr. Garg, I'll give you the final say before we close, sir. As we await more clarity and more details, what do you believe the implications will be of the announcement that's coming for the Indian economy, not just in the near term, but in the medium term as well? Oh, we seem to have lost that line with the former Finance Secretary. Well, Nilesh, Mr. Anil Bhardwaj, Navneet, Kaushik, many thanks for staying on with us here on CNBC TV18 and taking us through your thoughts on the big announcement that's coming from Prime Minister Modi, that 20 lakh crore rupee package, the Atmanirbhar economic package that's been announced by the Prime Minister. We'll take a break. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with a lot more news and analysis.